My name is Professor Thomas Mitchell, and I've been teaching mathematics and statistical analysis at Boston University for 16 years. My specialty is pattern recognition in large data sets, and I've done consulting work for various government agencies on probability analysis and predictive modeling. I've always been fascinated by numbers, not just their mathematical properties, but their deeper significance in human culture and history. What I never expected was that my academic research would lead me to discover what appears to be a sophisticated system of numerical coordination that's been used to time major world events for centuries. 7 months ago, in January 2025, I was working on a research project analyzing statistical anomalies in historical event timing when I stumbled across patterns that seemed mathematically impossible. What started as routine academic curiosity quickly became the most fascinating discovery of my career, because I found evidence that major historical events, including September 11th, weren't just random occurrences. They were carefully timed according to ancient numerical formulas that maximized their psychological and cultural impact. I'm sharing this research because I believe people deserve to understand how numbers and mathematical principles are being used to shape world events. The patterns I've discovered suggest a level of coordination and planning that goes far beyond what most people realize, and the implications for how we understand recent history are staggering. It began with what seemed like a straightforward statistical analysis. I was examining the timing of major historical events to see if there were any patterns in how societies react to crises. I was specifically looking at economic collapses, wars, natural disasters, and terrorist attacks to understand if there were optimal timing windows for maximum social impact. I started with a data set of about 200 significant events from the past century, analyzing everything from the timing within the year, the day of the week, even the specific dates chosen for major announcements or attacks. What I expected to find was essentially random distribution, events happening when circumstances aligned, regardless of specific dates or numerical significance. Instead, what I found made my hands literally start shaking as I looked at the statistical outputs. The probability of the patterns I was seeing occurring by random chance was less than 1 in 10 million. Have you ever had that moment as a mathematician when the numbers in front of you are telling you something that seems impossible, but the data is absolutely clear? That's exactly what happened when I started seeing the same numerical sequences appearing over and over again in the timing of major historical events. September 11th was just the beginning. When I analyzed that date numerologically, 9/11 or 9 plus 1 plus 1 equals 11, I realized I was looking at numbers that have been considered sacred and powerful in multiple ancient civilizations for thousands of years. But that wasn't the coincidence. The coincidence was that virtually every major historical event in the past century follows similar numerical patterns. Let me explain what I discovered about the mathematical significance of these numbers in ancient systems, because this is where the pattern becomes undeniable. In Babylonian numerology, which dates back over 4,000 years, the number 9 represents completion and endings, while 11 represents disorder and transition. The combination 9 to 11 was specifically used in their mathematical texts to denote the end of one cycle and the chaotic transition to another. The Babylonians used a base 60 numbering system that influenced time measurement, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and their numerical symbolism spread throughout the ancient world. Pythagorean mathematics, developed in ancient Greece around 500 BC, assigned specific mystical properties to numbers. According to Pythagorean theory, 9 is the number of finality and judgment, while 11 is the number of excess, going beyond the perfect 10. When you combine these concepts, 9 to 11 represents the mathematical formula for ending one era and beginning another through crisis and transformation. Chinese numerology, formalized in the I Ching around 3,000 years ago, uses similar principles. The I Ching consists of 64 hexagrams that predict cycles of change and transformation. The 9th hexagram represents small restraining force, the building of pressure before release. The 11th hexagram represents peace through unity, the harmony that follows necessary destruction. What makes this mathematically significant is that these weren't isolated cultural beliefs. These numerical systems spread through trade routes and cultural exchange, creating a shared understanding of numerical significance that influenced civilizations across Asia, Europe, and eventually the Americas. As a mathematician, I was genuinely fascinated by the sophistication of these ancient systems. They weren't just primitive superstitions. They were complex mathematical frameworks for understanding cycles of change and transformation. But what really got my attention was when I realized that modern events continue to follow these exact same numerical patterns. When I started analyzing other major events using the same numerical principles, the results were absolutely mind-blowing. The attack on Pearl Harbor happened on December 7th, 1941. When we analyzed this numerologically, 12 plus 7 equals 19, which reduces to 1 plus 9 equals 10, the number of completion in ancient systems. This creates a perfect numerical culmination. The stock market crash of 1929 happened on October 24th. Numerologically, 10 plus 2 plus 4 equals 16, which reduces to 1 plus 6 equals 7. The number of spiritual transformation and mystical change in virtually every ancient numbering system. The fall of the Berlin Wall happened on November 9th, 1989. Even though this was a positive event, it still follows the same numerical pattern as September 11th, just reversed. 11 represents disorder and transition. 9 represents endings and completion. The mathematical formula is identical. The more I analyzed, the more patterns emerged. Major market crashes, the timing of wars, even the dates chosen for significant political announcements. They all follow numerical sequences that correspond to ancient mathematical principles about timing and psychological impact. But here's what really convinced me that this isn't coincidence. I found financial records and planning documents that show major organizations actually consulting with numerologists and mathematical advisors when planning the timing of significant announcements or operations. What I discovered through my research is that there are consulting firms that specialize in what they call temporal optimization, essentially using ancient numerical principles to determine the most psychologically effective timing for major events or announcements. These firms work with government agencies, multinational corporations, and other organizations that need to maximize the impact of their actions. The mathematical principles they use are remarkably sophisticated. They combine traditional numerological analysis with modern psychological research about how people process numerical information and respond to events that occur on dates with specific mathematical properties. For example, dates that reduce to the number 7 consistently produce stronger emotional responses and longer-lasting psychological impact than dates that reduce to other numbers. This isn't superstition. It's based on measurable psychological and neurological responses that can be verified through brain imaging and behavioral studies. The number 11, which appears so prominently in September 11th, has particularly powerful psychological properties. Research shows that the number 11 creates a sense of instability and unease that makes people more susceptible to accepting major changes in their social and political environment. It's literally a mathematical formula for psychological conditioning. When I looked at the timing of major policy changes and social transformations, I found that they almost always occur shortly after events that happened on dates with specific numerical properties. The Patriot Act was passed 45 days after September 11th, and 45 reduces to 9, creating a numerical echo of the original event. The Iraq War began on March 20th, 2003. March 20th, 2003, which contains multiple repetitions of the numbers 2 and 3, creating what numerologists call a power amplification pattern. This isn't random. These timing decisions are being made deliberately, using mathematical principles that most people don't understand, but that have measurable effects on human psychology and social behavior. I started tracking the timing of major events in the 21st century, and the patterns became impossible to ignore. The COVID-19 pandemic was declared a global emergency on March 11th, 2020. When we analyze this numerologically, March 11th reduces to 3 plus 1 plus 1 equals 5, and 2020 reduces to 4. 5 plus 4 equals 9, the number of endings and completion in ancient numerological systems. The initial lockdowns in most Western countries began on dates that correspond to specific numerical patterns. March 15th, March 20th, March 24th. all dates that contain multiples of 5 or reduced to numbers with specific psychological properties, according to ancient mathematical principles. The timing of the vaccine rollouts followed similar patterns. December 14th, 2020, when the first vaccines were administered in the United States, reduces to 12, which further reduces to 3, the number of synthesis and harmony in ancient numerological systems. The more I researched, the more I realized that this system isn't new. It's been used for centuries, but it's become much more sophisticated with modern psychological research and data analysis capabilities. I found references to numerical timing in planning documents from major historical events going back hundreds of years. The Boston Tea Party happened on December 16, 1773. Analyzing this numerologically, 12 plus 1 plus 6 equals 19, which reduces to 10 completion. The year 1773 contains 2 sevens and a 3, which in ancient numerology represents spiritual transformation through conflict. The signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, follows similar principles. July 4th numerologically represents 7 plus 4 equals 11, disorder and transition. The year 1776 reduces to 21, which further reduces to 3, synthesis and new beginning. These weren't coincidences. The Founding Fathers were well educated in classical mathematics and philosophy, including Pythagorean numerological principles. They deliberately chose dates that would have maximum psychological and spiritual impact according to the mathematical knowledge of their time. The same pattern continues through American history. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861. The numbers 4, 1, 2, and 8 create a mathematical sequence that corresponds to the ancient formula for necessary destruction leading to reunification. World War I was declared by most European nations on dates in early August 1914. August is the 8th month, and 8 represents material transformation in ancient numerological systems. 1914 reduces to 1 plus 9 plus 1 plus 4 equals 15, which reduces to 6, the number of harmony through conflict resolution. World War II began on September 1, 1939. September 1st numerologically represents completion through new beginning. 1939 reduces to 22, which further reduces to 4, the number of foundation and stability through destruction of the old order. As a mathematician, I was absolutely fascinated by the consistency of these patterns. The probability of this level of numerical coordination occurring by chance across centuries of major historical events is essentially zero. Someone, or some group of people, has been using sophisticated mathematical principles to time significant events for maximum psychological and social impact. But what really convinced me that this is an ongoing, coordinated system was when I started analyzing very recent events and found that the same patterns continue today. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was completed on August 31st, 2021. Numerologically, August 31st reduces to 8 plus 3 plus 1 equals 12, which further reduces to 3, synthesis and completion. 2021 reduces to 5, change and transformation. The combination creates a mathematical formula for ending one cycle and beginning another. The invasion of Ukraine began on February 24th, 2022. This date contains multiple repetitions of the number 2, creating what numerologists call a master number pattern. When analyzed, February 24th reduces to 8, material transformation, while 2022 is itself a master number representing unlimited potential for change. What I discovered through my research is that there are networks of advisors who specialize in applying these ancient mathematical principles to modern strategic planning. They work with governments, international organizations, and major corporations to optimize the timing of significant announcements and actions. These aren't mystical fortune tellers. They're highly educated mathematicians, psychologists, and cultural analysts who understand how numerical symbolism affects human behavior on both conscious and unconscious levels. They use sophisticated computer modeling to analyze how specific dates and numerical patterns will impact public psychology and social stability. I found evidence of consulting contracts between major government agencies and firms that specialize in chronological optimization. The fees for these services run into millions of dollars. which suggests that the people paying for this advice believe it provides significant strategic advantages. The mathematical principles they use combine ancient numerological knowledge with modern psychological research. They understand that certain numerical patterns trigger specific emotional and psychological responses that can be measured and predicted with remarkable accuracy. For example, events that occur on dates containing the number 7 consistently produce higher levels of media coverage and longer-lasting public memory than events on other dates. Events on dates containing the number 11 create more social instability and willingness to accept dramatic policy changes. Events on dates containing master numbers like 22 or 33 generate responses that seem to resonate across multiple cultural and social boundaries. This isn't superstition, it's applied psychology based on mathematical principles that have been tested and refined over thousands of years of human history. When I analyzed the timing of major market events, the patterns became even clearer. The stock market crash of October 19, 1987, happened on a date that reduces to 8, material transformation. The dot-com crash peaked on March 10, 2000, which reduces to 6, harmony through resolution of excess. The 2008 financial crisis began with the collapse of Lehman Brothers on September 15. This date reduces to 6, the same number associated with previous market corrections. The timing wasn't accidental. It was chosen to maximize psychological impact and social acceptance of major economic restructuring. Recent cryptocurrency market movements follow similar patterns. Major Bitcoin peaks and crashes consistently occur on dates that correspond to specific numerical principles about cycles of expansion and contraction. Have you noticed how major announcements about economic policy, international conflicts, or social changes seem to happen on dates that feel somehow significant or memorable? That's not coincidence. Those dates are being chosen specifically because they contain numerical patterns that enhance their psychological impact. The more I studied these patterns, the more I realized that we're looking at a system of knowledge that bridges ancient wisdom and modern strategic planning. The mathematical principles that guided ancient civilizations in timing their most important ceremonies and decisions are still being used today to coordinate major world events. This raises profound questions about how much of what we consider spontaneous historical development is actually carefully orchestrated according to mathematical principles that most people don't understand. When you start looking for these numerical patterns, you see them everywhere. The timing of elections, the announcement of major scientific discoveries, the launch of new technologies, even the scheduling of cultural events like the Olympics or major entertainment releases, they all follow mathematical principles that correspond to ancient numerological systems. What's particularly fascinating is how sophisticated this coordination has become. Modern practitioners of these systems don't just use simple number reduction. They employ complex mathematical models that account for multiple numerical variables, cultural context, and psychological timing to optimize the impact of their chosen dates. They understand that numerical symbolism operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The conscious mind processes dates as practical information, but the unconscious mind responds to the mathematical patterns and symbolic meanings that have been encoded into human culture over thousands of years of civilization. This gives them the ability to influence public psychology and social behavior in ways that most people don't recognize or understand. By timing major events according to ancient mathematical principles, they can enhance the emotional impact, increase media coverage, and shape public responses in predictable directions. The implications for how we understand modern history are staggering. How many events that we consider random or reactive were actually planned and timed according to sophisticated mathematical principles? How much of what we think is spontaneous social change is actually the result of carefully coordinated timing designed to maximize psychological impact? I've been tracking upcoming dates that correspond to significant numerical patterns, and based on the historical data, there are several periods in the near future when major events are statistically likely to occur. Dates that contain master numbers that reduce to psychologically significant values, or that correspond to important cycles in ancient mathematical systems. I'm not making specific predictions, but I am saying that if you understand these patterns, you can identify windows of time when major announcements or events are more likely to occur. And if you know what to look for, You can recognize when timing choices are being made deliberately rather than randomly. The question that keeps fascinating me is, how long has this system been in operation? Are we looking at knowledge that's been passed down through secret societies and elite educational institutions for centuries? Or is this a more recent development that combines ancient numerical wisdom with modern psychological and technological capabilities? What I can say with mathematical certainty is that the patterns exist. They're consistent across centuries of historical data, and they continue to operate in contemporary events. The probability of this level of coordination occurring by chance is statistically impossible. This suggests that there are groups of people who possess sophisticated knowledge about how numerical symbolism affects human psychology and social behavior, and they're using this knowledge to influence the timing and impact of major world events. What do you think about these mathematical patterns? Have you noticed anything unusual about the timing of major events in your own life or in recent news? Because once you start looking for these numerical relationships, they become impossible to ignore. The ancient civilizations understood something profound about the relationship between numbers, time, and human psychology. That knowledge hasn't been lost. It's been preserved, refined, and adapted for use in modern strategic planning and social coordination. We're living through history that's being shaped by mathematical principles that connect us directly to the wisdom of ancient Babylon, Greece, and China. The same numerical formulas that guided the timing of ancient ceremonies and the planning of historical empires are still being used today to coordinate the events that define our modern world. The numbers are still speaking to those who know how to listen. The question is, now that you understand the language, what will you do with this knowledge?